Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a super exciting video for you. I joined forces with Capture One and I'm going to be showing you my full color grading technique in Capture One 21 that just launched today. When Capture One approached me about doing a video for them, I was absolutely over the moon. I've used Phase One and Capture One a few years ago, but I've never really fully switched because it is quite scary to try and learn a full new software when you're in the midst of your shoots, when you have loads of work to do. It's always hard to take that step back and try and learn something new. So when I was chatting to them now a few weeks ago, they were kind enough to show me around, show me how everything works, and it made the whole process so much easier. So now I'm here trying to pass on the knowledge and show you guys how I color grade my images from start to finish. Before we get into this video, make sure to keep watching. We will be giving away one Capture 121 license to one of you lucky viewers. So keep watching and you'll find out the details very soon.
Walking hand in hand on the ocean floor, down deep we wander. Louder we sing, no there is no cure in this together.
Okay, so these are the images that we're going to be working with today. It's a shoot that I did recently in Tulum. As you see, we have a wide variety of different lighting scenarios, which is what I wanted to show you. So we have these kind of images that are direct sunlight, super harsh, light, lots of highlights and shadows that are almost clipped, so this is what you want. Then we have images like this that are a bit more balanced, they're a bit more dull because they are in the shade. Then we have these that are completely overcast. So yeah, it's going to be showing a wide range of different scenarios that we have in these. So I'm going to start with this one, but before I do, one big thing for me is I've been mostly a Lightroom user, so switching to a new layout is very frustrating. You end up switching between all the different tabs and you end up looking for things, and it's just not ideal. So there's two things that you can do if you are switching from Lightroom. One of them is to just add tabs here, which is very helpful. So you can add tool. So for example, if you want to add color balance, you can just add it here and then it's gonna pop up, which is very helpful. And then also, if you want to make it even easier on yourself, you can just go into Window, go into Workspace, and then Migration. And that will basically give you a Lightroom setup pretty much. So you have all your layers, all your setups in one tab, which is great. It makes the life so much easier. And then for example, in Lightroom, my base characteristics are always on the very top. So I can always just rearrange and just drag it and just move it here. So that's really helpful as well. So you can literally have exactly the same layout, so you don't have to stress about having a completely new layout in the program. Also, if you want to drag stuff out, you can do that too. You can just put it on the screen here. I probably won't be doing that, but it is an option as well. So we are going to start with this image here, and we are going to be going through a bunch of different settings, and then I'm going to show you how I color grade in different examples of different photos. First thing that Capture 121 has upgraded is the color profiles. As you see, I have my Canon 5D Mark IV generic profile selected here. And then if we change into Pro Standard, you can see straight away how much less red the skin tones are in this particular setup, which I think is super good because the color is going to be way more accurate with the Pro Standard. Another thing that the Pro Standard does as well, it works more like a Luma curve, which means it doesn't affect your saturation as much when you're adjusting other things. So you're going to change the luminosity mostly instead of affecting the highlights and the shadows, and it's not going to make it muddy, which is very good. So this is one of those things that are new with Capture 121. Another thing that you can do that I really love about Capture 121 that Lightroom unfortunately doesn't have is the fact that you can create a layer and work on a layer. And that's important for multiple reasons. And one of them is because you can adjust how much you want to change the image. So if you do a bunch of adjustments and you decide that, I think I went too far, I'm not really sure about this, you can just bring the opacity down, which is super helpful. So I'll just show you. So we'll just click here and do new filled adjustment layer. And then we're gonna go to exposure. This is just going to be a sample image. If, for example, I went too far, I'll bring my brightness down, or maybe not. I'll do highlights and whites down, as I would always do, shadows and blacks up. And then you look at the image and you're like, you know what, this is not really working for me. I've gone a bit too far. What you can do is you can just literally bring the slider down. Another thing that you can use layers for that are very helpful is your styles. Styles are basically presets in Lightroom, but they are called styles in Capture One 21. So just so you know, it's just a different way of naming it, but it's the same thing. So what we can do is we can grab this one, apply to a new layer. This is just one that I created. I don't have many styles yet here, obviously. And you can get back here and then you can bring the opacity up or down. So it's very helpful if you go too far. If you think that the preset is a bit too much, you can just bring the opacity down, which is great. I wish Lightroom had that option, but it doesn't. So, okay, we're gonna delete this for now because we don't really need it. And we're gonna start with our settings. So I have everything here that I need. I have all my color, the exposure, high dynamic range, and so on, so it's great. And we're gonna start with exposure, as always. And then we're gonna leave it at that. And then we're gonna bring highlights and whites first. For those who watch me and see my color grading videos before, I always bring highlights and whites down quite significantly. I find it's very important to have a lot of detail preserved in the highlights. As you also know, I usually underexpose my images, as you can see here, because I would rather have more detail, and with Capture One, you can recover so much detail from the shadows and the highlights. So I'll do this, and then I'll add a bit more, I'll brighten the shadows and the blacks basically, which is what I always do. So this is where we're at the moment. So another thing that Capture One has launched or improved in this version of Capture One is the haze. Now, when I was in Lightroom, I would use the haze quite a lot because it would help with, I don't really use contrast curves as much. I mostly just use the haze in Lightroom because I feel like it works better for me. Here it might not be necessary because, as I mentioned, with the new color profile, you know, the Pro Standard, it's not going to affect the colors as much. It's going to be more of a luminosity range, which is helpful. So we might just be able to do contrast without getting the skin tones affected, as you can see here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into the haze and we're gonna bring it up a tiny bit. And I like using the haze even for portraits because I find that it makes the image a bit more crisp and a bit more, you know, balanced and sharp, which I really like. So it's definitely something that I enjoy. And then you can do a shadow tone as well if you want to. If you're not happy with the shadow tone, but it automatically selected, you can get a picker, do manual, and then you can just pick wherever, and then it's going to change the tone of the shadows wherever it is in the image, which is very helpful. So we're going to leave that. We're going to go back here. So this is what we are working with at the moment. Cool. With curves, there's Luma curve, which, as I said, it's a luminosity curve. I don't really use curves that much, so I'm just going to skip it for now. Next, I don't really need black and white. See, we can just remove it. We don't do black and white in here. Not in this household. So another thing that is very helpful in the new Capture 121 is the speed edit that you can select. So you do edit keyboard shortcuts and you go into speed edit keys, and you have different keys that work and you can adjust. So all you have to do is, for example, exposure is Q. You can change the keys to whatever you want it to be. But just for the sake of this experiment, we'll just do this. So you go Q for exposure, so you can enter full screen if you want to. You just press Q and then you just move the mouse one way or the other so you can kind of see clearer where your image is, and you just keep dragging the mouse up and down and you get the photo, which I think is super helpful because if you know what you're doing and you know all your shortcuts, that's going to speed up your edit drastically, which I think is great. So this is just an example that I wanted to show you before we move on to color. So when it comes to color, we have our usual basic setup that I usually use in Lightroom, and then you have advanced and skin tone that I'm going to touch on in a second. So with basic, I'm just going to go here and just adjust the way I would always adjust. For hue, I would just go a bit more orangey. I will lower the saturation ever so slightly because that's what I usually do. And then I'm going to darken the skin as well because I always love those really rich, deep skin tones and I find them really, really nice. So I'll just go lower on the lightness, and that's that. I might have to bring the exposure up a tiny bit actually. Oh yeah, I did actually change it when I was showing you guys, so that makes sense. I was like, why is the image so dark? Makes sense. Okay, so we have it here. And then this is what we have so far. So as you see, there's definitely way more detail in the highlights and the shadows. The skin tones are a bit lighter, obviously because of the exposure, but they're always much richer. So what I'm gonna do is maybe even go down with the lightness as well. So as you see, my images are usually very muted. They are not very rich in highlights, especially with Canon. You know, I want to preserve as much detail as possible in the highlights. I usually underexpose my images as well because of that. So that's basically what we're doing. The next thing that I want to show you is how to correct the skin tones. So as you see here, her face is pretty good. There isn't really many things to fix in the first place. But there's some darker areas here and maybe like this little red area here that I might not necessarily want to keep. So what we're gonna do is we're going to create a new layer and then just use the brush and adjust the size of the brush with the keys. And we're going to go here in these areas that I kind of find maybe a bit too dark or I just don't really like and I want to fix a tiny bit. Okay, we have this. And then we're going to grab the skin picker and we're going to go here. There we go. And now we can adjust these areas that were masked out basically. So what we can do is we can change the hue, the saturation. So as you see here, it kind of changes the area. We can change the lightness, which is kind of mostly what we want. So we can just erase this a tiny bit. Then saturation, we can, you know, make it as extreme as we want to basically. So this is it here. And then uniformity, you can do hue, saturation, and lightness as well. So you have hue, you can kind of try and desaturate it a tiny bit. Lightness, we can try and lighten this area as well, which I think does pretty well. And then saturation, if you want to either saturate it or desaturate it. But for us, it's fine. It's quite much more uniform when it comes to how the skin looks. So this is just a very useful tool if you have little things that you want to fix, if there is maybe discoloration in the model's skin, if there is redness and so on, it will be definitely very helpful. So now we are going to go back into the background layer and go into color balance, which is shadows, midtones, and highlights. I don't usually adjust midtones as much, but I will do it just for the sake of this. So with this one, you just have this wheel that you can adjust, and you have different colors as you see, and the further away from the center you move it, the more extreme the shadows and the highlights are. So if I, for example, wanted to be a bit cooler in the shadows, which I sometimes do, I would just probably add a tiny bit of blue and then just like go back pretty close to the center, so it's pretty much touching on the center. And then with highlights, I usually like to go a bit more green in my highlights because I think it's very complementary. So I can just add a tiny bit of green. And then with midtones, that changes pretty much the entire image, so I don't necessarily want to change that much, to be honest. So I think we're just gonna stick to this where we are. Okay, and then you have sharpening, noise reduction, lens correction, vignetting, keystone, film grain. I don't really use any of this stuff. Okay, and then I'm going to go a bit more into exposure, maybe add a bit more contrast into the image as well. That looks pretty good, I think. As you can see, here's the before and here's the after. So there's quite a drastic change for sure. The photo is definitely way more sharper. There's more detail in the skin. You can see the nice glow on her shoulder and so on. You know, there's so much more detail in the skin. We also did the skin tone fixing, so she doesn't have these darker patches underneath her eye like she did in the before. So I think overall it looks pretty good. So now that we have this, we are going to show you one other image. So there's two ways to go about it. You can either go into this little section here, where styles and presets are, and then just copy everything from the clipboard and just, you know, copy and then paste. Or you can just do copy and apply here, which is pretty helpful. So you can just do copy, and then in this one you can just apply. So as you see here, this is what we get straight away. As you see, obviously with this particular image, my highlights and shadows were a bit more pushed up because the image was kind of gray. So we're going to just change that a tiny bit. We're going to lower the exposure for sure. And then another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the blues as well, because as you guys know, I'm pretty specific about my blues in my photos. I usually go into that more ocean kind of color because I just think it works really nicely. And then what I usually do is I desaturate it quite a lot, and then I bring down the lightness because it just kind of makes everything a bit more dramatic, which I like. So this is one of these. So as you see, there wasn't that much change happening. I literally just adjusted 2 or 3 things, and that's pretty much fine. So this looks pretty good. We are going to go into this image now. So we're going to copy this again, and then we're going to move on to this guy here, and then we're going to click apply. So as you see here, obviously because it was overcast, it definitely needs to be a bit warmed up because it's quite kind of grayish and blue that I don't really like. So we're going to put the white balance up a tiny bit more, and then we might bring up the exposure a tiny bit, and then maybe boost up the highlights and shadows a tiny bit because, as I said, it is overcast, so it's a bit different. So here we are, and then maybe just this to be a bit darker. So as you see here, that looks pretty good. Again, copy, and then we're gonna apply here. Definitely need to make it brighter because this image was pretty dark. Okay, that's pretty good. And then maybe we'll just make it a tiny bit more blue. And then with this one, again, we're just gonna apply from the other image straight away because we want it to be super nice and contrasty. And then maybe we'll just go back on the Kelvins as well. So as you see, once you have that base edit, it's very, very fast to just reapply all the stuff that you just did into other images and just adjust accordingly. That's what I usually do when I use my presets or styles. I will just use one style and then just adjust accordingly to what the image needs in that particular case. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the rundown. As you see, the befores and afters, you know, switching to a new program is definitely daunting. I won't lie, you know, coming back from using my Lightroom for years and years, going into switching into a completely new program that is potentially very confusing is difficult, but at the same time, I find because Capture One does realize that it is a very hard switch, they make it as easy for you as possible to just be able to do these adjustments without having to stress too much about, you know, the layout and so on. It is mostly about the software, and I see that the software is super powerful and it definitely is working so well. So I'm definitely really excited to explore more and try to play around with it more. I think it's going to be great, and I think it's definitely going to, you know, bring my A game in photography. So I am definitely excited for this new chapter. I'm also very excited to finally release my styles because I know a lot of you have been asking for Capture One styles. So this is definitely coming soon. I just still need to get a bit more familiar with the software. But overall, I am very, very happy with how it works. And I have to say, I am very excited to keep playing around with it. As mentioned before, I will be giving away one Capture 121 license to one of you lucky viewers. All you have to do is comment down below on why you think you deserve the Capture 121 license and how is it going to elevate your photography game if you do end up winning it. Post your answers in the comments down below and I'll pick one lucky winner next week. Good luck and thanks. Okay, so as you guys see, this is it. This is my rundown of the software. There has been some really cool features that Capture 121 has released. I am so happy that I finally got to learn how to use the software properly. I got to play around with it and so on. I think it's going to be so helpful to my process and my color grading. I am also looking forward to maybe releasing some styles soon. We'll see, I guess. But I think it's just a new exciting chapter in my photography career, which I'm super excited about. So thank you so much for joining me. Let me know if you have any questions. I will try my best to answer them for you. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel and I will see you guys next time.